Hello, everyone. My name is Rob Fleck, and I am the director of Knoll Books, located in historic Newcastle, Delaware. I would like to welcome you to this year's virtual Knoll Fest 21 titled Women in the Book Arts to celebrate the centennial anniversary of women's suffrage in America. As we all know, the pandemic has caused many changes in our lives, in particular to in-person activities such as book fairs and conferences. For many of us, we miss seeing our family, friends, and colleagues. However, we knew the importance of stopping the spread of this terrible virus. Luckily, with the advancement in technology and using programs such as Zoom, we are coming to you live from our shop in historic Newcastle to bring you the next best thing, a virtual Knoll Fest complete with 4 speakers incorporated into a 3-day long book fair featuring some of the greatest printers and artists in the world today. Founded by my father, Robert D. Fleck Jr., most of you know him as Bob, Knoll has been on the forefront of bringing our clients the absolute highest quality books, manuscripts, collections, and ephemera pertaining to the book arts for over 45 years. Additionally, since 1978, we have also been a publisher of manuscripts that focus on bibliography and the history of the book. This dual model of both being an antiquarian secondhand bookstore as well as being a publishing house caused my father to expand on bringing bibliography to the masses. On October 5th, 1994, and only 25 feet from where I am speaking from you today, we held our first inaugural Knoll Fest on the 2nd floor of the Grand Opera House of Newcastle. This book fair had 14 fine press exhibitors set up with their own respected table to display their titles that they had created. Eventually, we would expand that number to 45 presses, printers, and artists later that year, while also including titles and talks from speakers around the world, as well as holding panel discussions regarding anything and everything to do with the book arts. I would also like to mention that this year's fest has the largest number of participants, and we're pretty proud of this, that we have ever had in our previous 20 fests. And for that, I would like to personally express my utmost gratitude and thanks to all those exhibitors that have joined us from around the world, as well as you watching at home. Our current Knoll Fest, Women in the Book Arts, will focus on the influence women had on traditional aspects of the bookmaking process, while simultaneously exploring and unraveling the future of feminism in fine press printing and art. So, without further ado, I would like to introduce our 2 speakers today. Our first speaker today is master printer Mindy Belloff, the proprietor of Intima Press, who creates high-quality fine press titles and broadsides from her studio in Manhattan, New York. Her work has earned her many awards and is displayed in institutions and collections around the globe. Our second speaker today is Dr. Sydney Berger, previous director of the Phillips Library of the Peabody Essex Museum and adjunct professor at both Simmons University and the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. His talk is composed in collaboration with Dr. Michelle Clunan, previous dean and professor of the School of Library and Information Science at Simmons University, as well as the previous chair at the Department of Information Studies at the University of California, Los Angeles. So, brings me to our first speaker. Our first speaker this morning is Mindy Belloff. Ms. Belloff produces fine letterpress printed editions under the imprint Intima Press, the only private press in Manhattan. The print shop has been located on Union Square for 17 years. She's been creating art for more than 35 years in painting, photography, and mixed media installations, and has focused on the art of the book for over 2 decades. She holds a Master of Arts from New York University, and her editions are in numerous permanent collections, including the Library of Congress, the Victoria and Albert Museum, and the National Museum of Women in the Arts. In 2009, Ms. Belloff produced a meticulous hand-set recreation of the unanimous Declaration of Independence as printed by Mary Catherine Goddard in 1777. In addition to the historic edition, she created a contemporary printing, which receives a Puffin Foundation grant supporting, and I quote, creative and innovative initiatives that advance progressive social change, end quote, for her rewriting proclaiming, quote, all people are created equal, end quote. She was interviewed on national television about these printings for a 4th July 4th special on CBS's This Morning in 2020. Inspired by Stieglitz's Intimate Gallery, in 2013, Miss Belloff opened Intima Gallery in upstate New York for a year. The gallery was an exhibition space for artists to gather and showcase their fine prints and books. In addition, she has taught as a visiting artist and lecturer for years and offered numerous classes in the art of the book, letterpress printing, and bookbinding from her Manhattan studio from 2004 to 2014. Close to 1,000 pieces of student ephemera from over a decade of teaching are archived at Columbia University's Butler Library. Miss Belloff's fine press editions, W2LZX, received an honorable mention for excellence in book design from the University of Texas in 2010. More recently, her award-winning volume, A Golden Thread, The Minotaur, A Contemporary Illumination, received the Fine Press Book Association Collectors Award, considered among the best show at the 2020 New York Fine Press Fair. The volume was on exhibition at the Peabody Essex Museum from September 2019 to March 2020. Michael Ryan, in his parenthesis journal review, described A Golden Thread as, quote, a genuine masterpiece of art and design, and, quote, a stunning achievement by one of our most gifted artists, mature and at the peak of her powers, end quote. Mindy Belloff's presentation is titled, Giving Voice to Women, Examining the Art of the Book of Intima Press Through a Feminist Lens. She will be speaking about her background as a visual artist and book artist, and the new publication from Intima Press, Hester, Emma, Sonia, with subtitle Joni, Annie, Tracy, a postmodern feminist critique, which is being introduced here at the Oak Knoll Fair. Everyone, please welcome to this year's Oak Knoll Fest and our first speaker, Miss Mindy Belloff. Hi, Mindy.
Good morning. Thank you, Rob and Aaron, for hosting the virtual fair this year and inviting me to speak today on women in the book arts. I'm going to share my screen now. Okay. I will give a little background first and just a quick disclaimer here that if you have any little kids in the room, the first 5 slides may not be appropriate for young eyes. I will frame my talk with a small selection of work and early influences. As a student at New York University in the mid-1980s, Soho was a backyard bustling with galleries, Guerrilla Girl street posters, and women photographers coming to the fore. The East Village, gritty with drug problems, was also a petri dish of artistic activity. Friends were opening galleries or putting out calls for artists to meet at a certain location and bring a painting with them, mine being surreal and feminist in nature. At that time, the Museum of Modern Art screened a documentary called 6 Painters of the 1980s. Men talking about their art themselves, male dealers, male curators, writers, and historians. In response, I gathered 6 women from our studio, set up a large video camera, and recorded each artist talking in front of her painting. I was tired of David Sally's paintings of naked women with their heads chopped off, so my contribution was titled Mr., a homage to David Sally, a 7.5-foot high painting featuring a portrait of Sally smoking his cigar in front of a large detail of a male nude painted in Sally's signature style. Barbara Kruger's photographs with text and Nan Golden's intensely personal portraits resonated. I was fortunate to have been in conversations and critiques with both artists, as well as with Vito Acconci, whose work questioned private and public boundaries. In my new book, Hester, Emma, Sonia, which I'll talk about in a little bit, reproductions of my early artworks adorn the pages. Personal narrative has defined my work over the years, and my own personal mythology informs the paintings, photographs, installations, and books I have created. In the early 90s, I struggled with my own familial turmoil when my mother was diagnosed with and succumbed to cancer. It was also at this time that HIV and AIDS ravaged the lives of friends and creatives. Themes of entropy dominated gallery exhibits in the New York art world. The series is titled Lost Irony Identity with subtitles Tell Me Why, Witness, and Empathy. Many of the works reproduced in this volume, my current volume, are from this series. I worked the wall like a piece of writing, revising and creating mini narratives within the whole. I also designed and welded steel books, which I secured to the wall for people to touch and move its paper pages. The piece was reviewed by Helen Cotter in the New York Times, who wrote, "Personal and specifically autobiographical subject matter is increasingly important in contemporary art, and it is at the heart of Miss Belloff's tiny paintings." As a book artist, I have included the voices of women in my work, including my own, and will show a few examples here. I Am My Own Worst Anxiety is an early book of self-portraits with text, printed on translucent papers, which create an after image when the pages are turned. The piece inspired a longer text recorded in a layered audio on a 6-minute loop within a photographic installation titled, "And We Always Thought We Were the Normal Ones." My own personal poem, Caught Inside a Dream Unfolding from 1999, weaves the story of myself, my mother, and the mythical Gorgon representing the cancer that took my mother's life. The book is a culmination of 8 years of writings, drawings, and installations. It communicates a psychological and physical struggle involving intense feelings and intimate memories, past pain, present healing, and future hope. 4 semi-transparent pages throughout the book act like the chorus in a Greek tragedy, sometimes as pause or exclamation, and at other points like a rhythmic chant. I created a number of broadsides by living women artists, including Deborah Landau and Phyllis White, and books by Phyllis Levin, Molly Peacock, and Janet Frame. In 2009, I handset the Declaration of Independence as printed by a woman, Mary Catherine Goddard, in January of 1777. It was the first printing to publicly reveal the names of the signers. But most unique about it to me was the printer, a highly respected presswoman. Through lectures and essays, I have endeavored to enlighten people about this brave colonial woman so that she may be written back into the historical record. In addition to the historic recreation, on July 4th, 2010, I went to press on an inclusive edition of the Declaration, which I rewrote to state all people are created equal. A Golden Thread was a 2-year project completed in 2018 of Hawthorne's short story of the Minotaur. The book is divided into 3 sections, printed letterpress, on ivory, tan, and white papers. The first section describes the travels of Theseus to Athens to find his father and the hero's journey to Crete, where he confronts the evil King Minos and meets the king's daughter, Ariadne. In the second section on the darker paper, Ariadne leads Theseus to the maze and devises the plan for him to find and slay the Minotaur. She provides the thread that weaves through the story, and she holds on to it, his lifeline. His fate is in her capable hands, as she shows him the way and awaits at the entrance to the maze while Theseus descends through the dark depths. Hawthorne writes of the gentle twitch of the thread, reassuring Theseus that his way out is secure. His success is completely dependent upon her. Theseus emerges as the last section of the book transitions to bright white paper, printed with a labyrinth of handwritten text of Carl Jung's words. Theseus asks Ariadne to come back with him to Athens, and she rejects his offer. The thread motif on the spine of the book is printed on both end sheets with self-portraits as the spider Ariadne, a centauride, and a sphinx. The new work, Hester, Emma, Sonia, is a 300-page volume and approximately 10 by 7¼ inches. It will be in the sewing and binding stage in a few weeks. Each story is condensed and follows the narratives in order. However, for the purpose of this talk, I will be going back and forth initially between the 3 sections. The book is a feminist reading of 3 classics from the 1850s: Nathaniel Hawthorne's The Scarlet Letter, Gustave Flaubert's Madame Bovary, and Fyodor Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment. I was greatly affected by these novels when I first read them in my formative years in the mid-1980s. The volume is a retrospect of philosophical texts and cultural critique, to which I have reintroduced myself more than 30 years after the initial readings. One goal of this edition is to give voice to the main female characters, Hester Prynne, Emma Bovary, and Sonia Marmeladov. There are many themes in this volume. I will present a number of them here, and I will not talk over all the images, but I will pause on some so you may read and look on your own. In a similar way to a medieval manuscript, on some pages I have printed comments in the margins with text of modern philosophers' writings or contemporary poetic lyrics at the bottom of the page, which may act as pause or emphasis. Other pages include historical references or short passages of text by other writers. And on other compositions, words are emphasized by a change of typeface or size. There are over 50 bibliographical references throughout the book, including Simone de Beauvoir's The Second Sex of 1953, Freud's Studies on Hysteria from 1893, Jean-Paul Sartre's Nausea from 1964, Marion Solomon's book Narcissism and Intimacy, Love and Marriage in an Age of Confusion from 1989, and Virginia Woolf's A Room of One's Own, to name a few. There are also over 40 lyrics referenced. The subtext of the book, as Rob mentioned, refers to 3 of the singer-songwriters, Joni Mitchell, Annie Lennox, and Tracy Chapman, but you'll see there are many others. There are over 40 artworks also listed in the appendix. Early in The Scarlet Letter, Hester Prynne's beauty is described as she emerges from prison with an infant in her arms and the letter A for adultery on her breast, standing as a Madonna with child. The voices of the governor, her estranged husband, Roger Chillingworth, and the priests order her to speak her secret, the name of the other adulterer. Instead of staying meek and silent, Hester is defiant. It is the pastor and fellow sinner, Mr. Dimsdale, who stays silent throughout, rather than confessing his own sins on the public stage. In section 1, I introduce text in both Latin and English from the Malleus Maleficarum, or the Witch's Hammer. Written in 1486 by 2 men, its purpose was to instruct other inquisitors on how to interrogate and convict mostly women as witches or heretics, anyone questioning Catholic beliefs. The treatise became the handbook for witch hunters and inquisitors. As the printing press became more widespread, it was published about 30 times by 1669. References to this book of horrors appear not only in Hester, the first section, but also in the second section, Emma, as you see here, in relation to Freud's writings on hysterics by Sissois and Clement. Freud writes, "Why do the confessions extorted by torture in The Witch's Hammer have so much similarity to my patients' narratives during psychological treatment?" I am currently finalizing the afterword of the book, The introduction is being written by art critic and curator Saul Ostro. Saul describes the edition as a dialogic and writes that dialogic refers to the use of conversation or shared dialogue to explore the meaning of something, as opposed to monologic, which refers to one entity with all the information simply given to others without exploration and clarification of meaning through discussion. Dialogic processes refer to implied meaning in words. Dialogic works carry on a continual dialogue that includes interaction with previous information presented. The term is used to describe concepts in literary theory and analysis, as well as in philosophy. Saul describes this volume as intertextual, that is, no text stands alone. Each is understood in the context of other text. The work is a machine, he writes, several systems working in coordination. I began section 2 with Emma's disappointing wedding night and her disillusionment with marriage. Simone de Beauvoir's writings on marriage and adultery, along with Joni Mitchell's song lyrics about conflicts and relationships, are juxtaposed with Flaubert's text. This quote is from Marion Woodman's book, The Pregnant Virgin, A Process of Psychological Transformation from 1985. Annie Lennox's song about obsession is typographically designed to evoke Emma's chaotic feelings during and after her romance with Rodolphe. In this section, Emma reacquaints herself with Léon, and their romance begins. On the left side is text from Virginia Woolf's novel Orlando. I began this project with the assumption that my audience will have either read the 3 novels or be inspired to read them in their entirety. Much of the omissions are descriptive. Toward the end of the story, Emma is distraught and has eaten arsenic, for those of you not familiar. And I concluded this section with Emma Bovary's death. I did not expand it with Flaubert's final chapters revealing Charles Bovary's grief, his discovery of Rodolphe's last letter to Emma, the conversation of the 2 men afterwards, or Charles's demise and their daughter Bertha's fate. The 3rd section is the longest one and has the most images in this presentation. Again, I will not be talking on all the slides. Crime and Punishment begins with Raskolnikov's self-absorption and contemplation of the murder of the pawnbroker Alyona. Raskolnikov meets Marmeladov. In his drunken monologue, he introduces Katerina Ivanovna, his second wife, who pushes his daughter Sonia into prostitution to earn money to feed Katerina's 3 children. His monologue continues here. The text on the left is from the book The Sex Which Is Not One from 1985, and the cologram on the right is handwritten text from Simone de Beauvoir's The Second Sex after Ang's Grand Odalisque painting. On the left is text from Jean-Paul Sartre and Friedrich Nietzsche. And the scene in the text here, Dostoevsky's text, is of two men talking in a bar or cafe about hypothetically killing the pawnbroker. And Raskolnikov is listening to their conversation. He takes it as a sign. The Doors lyrics on this page is paired with the accident of Marmeladov's with the horse-drawn cart. Raskolnikov comes at that point and sees him on the ground, all bloody. We finally meet Sonia as she runs to her father's deathbed, and as he sees her in her gaudy attire, he begs forgiveness. Music plays a prominent role in memory and culture, as well as in daily life. I often hear a particular song in my head in relation to a text. I carry the poignant words of these lyrics with me throughout the day and night as it repeats into following days as part of the discourse and the section of the story that I'm focused on. The words in the context of the story may change meaning. They may be poetic, critical, or tongue-in-cheek. When Sonia was introduced into the narrative at this point in the story, it was the operetta of Philip Glass that held relevance for me. In this volume, most of the philosophers' commentaries are in red ink and songwriters in aqua blue. Other quotes are in gray with historical references such as this one. The Nag Hammadi codices are ancient Coptic manuscripts that were found in Egypt in 1945. They are dated around the 4th century. This poem is assumed to have been written by a woman and speaks in the voice of a feminine divine power. I'll read a little bit of it. Do not be ignorant of me, for I am the first and the last. I am the honored one and the scorned one. I am the whore and the holy one. I am the wife and the virgin. I am the midwife and she who does not bear. I am the solace of my labor pains. I am the bride and the bridegroom. And do not cast me out among those who are slain in violence. But I am compassionate and I am cruel. Be on your guard. I am she who exists in all fears. Although Raskolnikov torments Sonia, we see her slowly emerge with her own voice, which becomes stronger as he confesses the murders to her. In red ink is the text of Carl Jung on schizophrenia and paranoia, and to the right in gray is an excerpt from Jean-Paul Sartre's Nausea. Following are additional pages on the Sonia section. The theme of self-sacrifice actually runs through all three novels. And Mary Daly here is a feminist writer on some of these issues. This is in the shape of a cross. In the text here, Raskolnikov is trying to explain why he committed the murder. And he goes through numerous scenarios. And in this part of the novel, he's still resisting going to the police and still resisting and talking about Siberia and prison. And all this he confesses to Sonia. The novel takes place in St. Petersburg, and as many of you know, there's a lot of description about the city itself. Elizabeth Blake writes, Sonia's silencing treatment is part of a greater tendency in Crime and Punishment to portray women characters through the eyes of their male counterparts. In the first 3 parts of the novel, before Sonia ever utters a word, her father, Raskolnikov, and Luzin present competing identities for her, ranging from a model of Christian self-sacrifice to a common prostitute. In this slide, Raskolnikov finally confesses to the police. He is tried and sent to Siberia. Then there's text about Raskolnikov, who becomes ill at the prison. And then he's admitted to the hospital and has a dream. In her essay, AIDS and Its Metaphors from 1990, Susan Sontag referenced the last chapter of Crime and Punishment, where Raskolnikov dreamt that the whole world was condemned to a terrible, new, strange plague that had come to Europe from the depths of Asia. This reference to the cholera epidemic was the link in the narrative for me to the current global health crisis, and also a chilling reminder of past unknown health emergencies. The early days of the coronavirus announcement reminded me of the early days of HIV fears here in New York City, as people glared untrustingly at one another and kept their distance. In addition, there's a short text from Albert Camus' The Plague from 1948, and current information on COVID from the World Health Organization. I'll read the Camus. Many continued hoping that the epidemic would soon die out and they and their families be spared. Thus, they felt under no obligation to make any change in their habits as yet. Plague was an unwelcome visitant, bound to take its leave one day as unexpectedly as it had come. There's also some text in here about what happened in Russia and how the people rose up and killed medical personnel. That's off to the left. It says the epidemic peaked in mid-1831 as about 600 people a day in the capital fell victim to the disease. Government offices, schools, businesses, and theaters were closed. Incited by the rumors that the disease was a result of deliberate contamination, insurgents destroyed ambulance carriages and sacked hospitals. On June 22, 1831, demonstrators in St. Petersburg gathered at the main cholera hospital, located on Senaya Square, and went on to ransack the building, murdering several doctors. The arrival of 2 regiments with cannons halted the crowd's progress. Finally, toward the end of the novel, Raskolnikov breaks down and weeps at Sonia's feet. In the text, it says they wanted to speak but could not. Tears stood in their eyes. They were both pale and thin. But those sick, pale faces were bright with the dawn of a new future, of a full resurrection into a new life. And here he said, I'll read a little bit of this. He thought of her. He remembered how continually he had tormented her and wounded her heart, meaning Sonia, of course. He remembered her pale and thin little face, but these recollections scarcely troubled him now. He knew with what infinite love he would now repay all her sufferings. And here is where Dostoevsky ends the story. Again, speaking of sacrifice, suffering, and renewal. The three stories are abridged and combined into one volume, reframed to invite a critical dialogue in the 21st century. My hope is that the resulting layered narrative recontextualizes the stories as it brings additional voices into the cultural conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mindy. That was great. The illustrations were gorgeous, and I love the abundance of typefaces that were used.
Thank you.
Excellent. Again, thank you, Mindy, for the lovely presentation. Now we'll start our Q&A section. If anybody would have a question for Mindy, please go ahead. And I believe we did have a hand raised from Rick's iPad.
Yeah, hi, Mindy.
Hi, Rick.
Yeah, thanks so much. Just wondering, how long have you been working on this book? When did you start?
Yeah, so I started the book before COVID. It's been a little over 2 years. I had pages at the Manhattan Fine Press Fair in March of 2020, which was right before the start of COVID, as you know. There were delays due to homeschooling and lockdown here in Manhattan and all the usual stuff we've all experienced. But I find that absorbing yourself in a narrative is actually a healthy thing to do. And so I started picking up all my, what I call my old friends, all my old books from this time, and rereading them and just having piles of books around and getting back into these narratives and finishing them. The printing actually isn't completely done. It will be finished hopefully in the coming 2 weeks, and then it'll go out for binding.
Oh, that's great. I'll look forward to seeing the finished product. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mindy, I actually did have a question. You do have this book. This is the book that you're going to be having currently on the virtual fest, correct? Excellent, excellent.
Yeah, it's on there. Looking at shipping for hopefully in December.
Okay.
It is really epic for me because it's 300 pages and there are 19 signatures that need to be sewn. The edition it'll be 30 to 32 with 25 standard in book cloth with clamshell box. I'm sorry I don't have any photographs, but there were also delays with the paper mill. We've just had so many delays of so many things the past year and a half. So things are out of my control in those terms. And
as is the way of the world, I think.
Yeah, and we have to be sort of less hard on ourselves, or at least I have to remind myself of that as well. So it's almost complete, but it is up for pre-publication sale.
Will there be any deluxe copies?
I'm thinking about 25 standard and up to 7, maybe even less deluxe, maybe 5.
Okay, excellent, excellent. So Richard actually looks to have a question.
Yes, okay, there, am I on?
Yes, hello.
Oh, good, thank you. I just wanted to note that the books that we're looking at, is just really a wonderful combination of scholarship, a knowledge of book design history, and craftspersonship. She's just done a wonderful job assembling all of those things together in a really large and complex project, and that she has something to really be proud of. And I appreciate looking at it. Thank you so much, Mindy, for coming on today.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I had about over 3,500 sheets of paper to coordinate and organize, and So it has been, there is a lot of complexity to it. A lot of references. I didn't realize it was going to be as big as it got. Each section is actually longer. So the first section is the shortest one. And then the second one gets a little more complex. And the third one, because it's Dostoevsky, of course, gets even more complex.
Well, it's just an incredible work of design, well thought out design. It's just absolutely incredible. But thank you so much for showing that work. It's just an incredible piece of work.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Sure.
If nobody has any more questions, well, thank you, Mindy. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you again.
Excellent. Excellent.